I'm so happy to welcome Melinda Ribner to our show today. Melinda is a teacher of Kabbalah, of meditation. You're a psychotherapist and the author of many books. You teach Jewish meditation, and I want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Your most recent book is Turning Pain into Blessing. Why did you name it that?
Well, I actually had an experience, what I call holy tears. And I write about it in the book. And I cried because of something that was happening in the synagogue. And I reflected on many times I had cried what I call holy tears. And that also brought blessing into my life. And I realized that most of my books that I wrote came out of that experience of crying holy tears. So I was going to call the book Holy Tears, Turning Pain into Blessing. But I thought that people wouldn't understand that teaching about holy tears without reading the book. So Turning Pain into Blessing seems to have more universal appeal because people are in pain in lots of different ways. You know, people are in pain because of life events, challenges, illnesses, loss of a loved one, loss of income. People are in pain because of disappointments, fear. There's a lot of pain in the world. And how can we go through the pain so that we can be empowered to be not only receive blessing in our life, but to be a blessing for other people? So that is what has always guided my work, because out of my pain, my tears, I was able to write books. And then the books reached lots of people. And I was not only blessed in the act of writing the book, but people who read the book told me that they were also blessed by the teachings.
Some people are crushed by painful experiences, and it becomes almost a lifetime of pure suffering, while other people find a way to transcend the experience and to make of it what you have done. What makes the difference?
Yeah, and that's what this book is devoted to help people move through grief, anger, disappointment, trauma, to be able to become empowered through the teachings, through the meditations, and through reading the stories of other people in this book. This is what's unique about this book. I called on people who had all kinds of trauma in their life, you know, from the loss of children, the illnesses, and they went through it in a way that enabled them to do acts of service that they wouldn't have done otherwise. So in the act of suffering, rather than wallowing in the experience of being a victim and feeling sorry for oneself, they went through the process of wrestling with faith. You know, there's a whole growth process for it to be authentic, and being able to transcend and connect to that which is greater than ourselves as human beings, which I call God. And this empowers people to go forth. One of the things that I address importantly in the book is that people have difficulty doing that because they don't have a relationship with God and they don't understand what is meant when we say the word God. And many people reject that connection with God because they think God doesn't exist, or that God doesn't care about them. And so there's no point in connecting to God. If there's evil in the world, can there really be a God? So those are questions that I think I have to address. I addressed in the first chapter of this book, because unless you can resolve these earlier assumptions about the nature of God, you can't progress.
And I'm going to ask you about that. I want to ask you something about what you just said. What if a person says to you, look, I've undergone some terrible trauma and I just can't get out of it because I have so much anxiety from it. And, people have early life programming that where the subconscious intrudes either with terrible anxiety or terrible depression, and they really can't control that. What would you say to people in that situation?
Well, I do address that. I do address that in the book, that it's very difficult to trust in God when your early years of life informed you that you can't trust, that it's unsafe to trust. Your parents are your representative to reality, and not all parents are trustworthy. So often people will need to have some remedial help. And I address that and learn how to reparent themselves, that we can be the parents that we wished we had, but we can now, as adults, learn to reparent ourselves. And that's empowering. We have to, and the book does address with meditations to help people to relax. One of the main things that I talk about in my meditation classes that are weekly and free, and it's a common theme, how to relax. Because relaxation allows a person to not only reduce stress and anxiety, it allows a person to be able to receive blessing in their life. And if they're tense and anxious, they're not going to be open to receive. So helping people to relax. And of course, when I'm working with people privately, I'm going to work more deeply in helping them to release, certain blocks that may be interfering in their ability to really be present with themselves. We want to really be present with ourselves. And that takes learning how to love and accept who we are as we are.
You quoted two very well-known rabbis many centuries ago, and they said something very interesting that we don't usually have it framed this way, and that was one was Rabbi Nachman, who said that a broken heart actually allows divine light to enter a person. And then the teacher, the Baal Shem Tov, said there is a master key, and I'm quoting, to open all the doors in the king's palace. And the king's palace is a metaphor for God's domain,
Blessing.
and can open the innermost chambers of the divine palace. The master key is the tears of a broken heart. So this is something that we mostly have not heard about, how to look at our suffering and our tears.
And also sometimes, and I write about this in the book, people have to learn how to cry again. People are afraid to cry. And they're afraid to cry to another person. And they're even afraid to cry to them alone at times. The book addresses, which is that when we are in pain, that it behooves us to cry to God, to express our pain, our vulnerability, to ask for divine help. And that makes all the difference. So encouraging people to be with their vulnerability, with their feelings, whatever they are. They could be grief, they could be anger, it could be sadness. All our feelings are beautiful. And if we allow ourselves to feel them, we can begin to release the hold that they have on our life, and so that we can be more open to receive. But if we don't feel them, then we get blocked up, we're stuck, we're in pain, and that's really often the root of addiction, is I'm in so much pain, and I can't allow myself to feel my pain, so I've got to numb myself in some way. So if I can give myself permission to lovingly accept my feelings as they are, without judgment, with love and compassion, I can let go of the hold that they have in my life, and I'm more open to go forward.
Would you say, and I think you almost are saying this, that there is a continuous stream of blessings coming from the universal consciousness, and that what's happening is that humans are blocking these blessings into their lives because of their refusal to accept that reality. Could you talk about that?
Yes, that's the real gist of it. Because the ego part of ourselves as human beings wants to feel in control, and feels if I'm in control, I'm safe. But what we find is that life is going to give us experiences that we are not in control of. And it's not a question of our being punished, but life is going to give us challenging experiences, and it's by design. And I talk about that. God could have created a world that would have been perfect and there would be no challenges, but that wasn't the divine plan. So we are all going to have challenges. And that is the opportunity for us to call out, to cry holy tears, call out for divine assistance, and to be open to receive. And that allows us to go forward. So there's no shame in crying. And it's a beautiful thing. You know, I asked in the book, because I reflected, how many times do I cry to another person? How many times, as a therapist, of course, I have the honor of hearing people cry. But to cry to another person, to be held as you cry to another person, is very redemptive. And so people have to learn how to cry in a way that is empowering, that doesn't make them feel like more of a victim, but it helps them to release the hold of the pain and the sadness, the grief and the anger have in their life. And often it's a challenging situation that stimulates this.
You've said that we have to learn to actively deepen our trust and experience of God daily, not just to believe in God. So you're saying something that mostly we don't hear too much. A lot of things are by rote when it comes to religion, unfortunately. What does it really mean to deepen our trust and experience
Right, we can
it?
believe in God in our consciousness, but can we feel God when we're in pain? Is God real to us, or is God just an intellectual idea of something that's been passed on to us, that there is a God, but that experience of connection is not available to us when we are suffering? And often that's the challenge of suffering, is to be able to to release that hold and make that deeper connection, and to experience ourselves more with our vulnerability, but also to know, and this is what I emphasize in the book, which is so important, we are more than our physical beings. We have a soul, and this is very basic, that we have a soul, And the soul is really our true essence, and it's who we were before came into this physical embodiment. It's who we are while we're here in this world, and it's who we will be when we leave our physical body. So accessing our soul sometimes it takes a little effort. That's why I give certain things that people can do to deepen their experience of their own soul and deepen their trust and faith in the Creator. So that's very much the heart of the book, because it's one thing to say, I believe in God. It's another thing to experience God in the midst of challenge and trial.
I think we should, a little later in this interview, get into the different levels of the soul, in different centers of the soul in Kabbalah, which you discuss in the book. And then you discuss two other things that really weren't known to me, that is the soul beyond the body, which you also talk about, which I do want to ask you about. But right now, the question that occurs to me is, why was all this created? You mentioned that creation was not an act of revelation, but actually an act of concealment, which probably a lot of people would wonder about. So what actually does that mean?
Right, you really read the book. Yeah, because we would think that creation is a revelation. But according to Kabbalistic teachings, creation is concealment. The world began before there was time, before there was space. According to Kabbalistic teachings, there was Ein Sof, limitless light. Limitless light. And we're taught that there arose a desire within Ein Sof to bestow love and light, its essence, on something other that it would experience itself as different than itself. So there was desire to love, to bestow goodness, and the desire to be known. So Ein Sof had this desire. And interestingly enough, since we're created in the image and likeness of God, those are our deepest desires, to love and to be known. So Ein Sof, went through a period of contraction, contracting its light, creating worlds of the angels, the high angels, the low angels, until we get to our world, which is the darkest world. The light of Ein Sof is most concealed. So we experience ourselves as separate from God, as separate from the light. But that's not the truth. But that's part of giving us the opportunity to yearn for that connection with Ein Sof, because Ein Sof wants to be loved and wants to love. So we have to open ourselves to receive. And sometimes it takes having a painful experience to say, okay, I'm ready to receive, God. I know I'm not in control of reality, but I know that you are. And I'm ready to receive. And that's part of why we have challenge in our life, because God really wants us to be able to receive the presence of God, the light and love of God. Otherwise, there was no purpose in creation. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it seems to me that we need to have our defenses broken, to have our egos challenged, because if we don't, then we can never be open enough for to see what reality actually is. We go,
We only see our own projection.
we see our own project.
We only see our own projection, and that's often the case, in life, that we are just seeing our own projections. We see our own projections with people. We see our own projection with our life experiences until life blesses us or crushes us so that we are open to a different vantage point of experiencing life and reality. Which gets us to the important concept, which I said in the beginning of the book, is that people have to let go of the immature concepts that they may have about God and to be open to a deeper revelation of who, what, where is God. If I'm experiencing God, and I gave a few examples, if I experience God, and I pray to something happen. I gave the example of a client. She was a meditation student, and she prayed for her son to live and not die. She prayed to God, and her son died. And so to her, in her mind, that was the end of her believed relationship with God. And she came to the meditation class, and she loved the relaxation and meditation, but she couldn't tolerate that I mentioned the word God, because in her mind, God should have saved her son, but chose not to. So that was the end of her relationship with God, because her relationship with God was conditional. If God answers my prayers, I believe in him. If he doesn't, then he doesn't exist. And so that's a stumbling block for people, and the challenge is really asking us to let go of our limiting concept of who we think God is and who we think we are, and open to something new and more fulfilling in our lives, more of who we really are, which we only experience ourselves in a very limited capacity. We're really unaware of the depths and heights that we can experience even as human beings. And if we want to hold on to our limited concepts of reality and who we are, then God says, okay, I can't bless you. I can't bless you unless you're ready to receive. You can have pain, and if you wake up to that experience, and we see, in my book, there's many stories of people. A story of a woman who had cancer. Fourth, I don't know if you remember this, if you read the whole, she's the last story in the book. And she had, 4th-stage cancer. And she went through it, and she said something so beautiful. She said, I thought the cancer was the end, but it's the beginning of a deeper story in my life. Because God wasn't real to her until she had 4th-stage cancer, and she had to call out. And then God became real to her in a way, she may have believed in God, but it wasn't a reality that was meaningful in her life. But through the process of her healing, going through her cancer and her treatment, she emerged from that experience a whole different, more vibrant, more authentic, deeper person than she was prior. And that's often the case with people who've gone through trials, that something emerges within them that they didn't even know that they had. And they become empowered to do good in ways that they never imagined before. And so I share a lot of those stories in the book so people know that just because you're going through painful experiences and it may feel like there's no hope, That's a gateway to go on to thrive, not just survive, but to thrive in life. And it can be a very difficult passageway, and sometimes we need help. And there's no shame in needing help. Needing help of a therapist, needing help of a spiritual guide, needing help of practices, and making it a disciplined practice in your life. You'll see the difference. You'll see the difference. How can we expect to have divine blessings if we're not making ourselves available for them?
It's such an important message because people tend to be very medicalized. Just, it's a total medicalization, and the spiritual aspect is very often overlooked, and the potential people have is overlooked, where it could be so valuable for them to see their situation from a different vantage point, which you're giving. I think it's a message that everyone should hear.
It's important, we have to, I'm not saying, that we should forsake doctors, alternative or medical doctors,
I know.
but we should find our healing just to doctors. Kabbalah says, seek out a doctor who has a good reputation because he has or she has greater angels working with him. Angels are always considered the conduit for healing. And there's stories in the book, there's some amazing stories of people who, there's a story of who, I don't know if you remember, she was on a ventilator, I think, for months. And then at a certain point, she got a message, what she needed to do for healing. And she was able to get off, and she got out of the hospital. She moved to Israel. Her message was sing for your people. And, before she was singing, but she couldn't make any sound, but with time, she got that message and she became a singer. And so she went through this process. It's amazing stories, that people get the messages from their own soul, what they need to do to heal. And it's not that, they forsake medical attention. There's some people who have. I met people who were told, I remember one time I met this man, he said, my mother was told that she could never have a child. And she went to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who's a great Rebbe, no longer in the physical world. And the Rebbe said, you can have children. I bless you. You can have children. Know that you are blessed to have a child. She went in. She had children. She had 4 sons. So sometimes, just because a doctor gives you a prognosis doesn't mean that's going to be your fate. We don't have to take negative prognosis as a fact. That can be a launching pad for prayer, for meditation. It's not up to the doctor. It's up to your ability to receive and connecting with angels and with Hashem, the source of all blessing. So we don't give up hope just because we have a negative prognosis from a doctor.
Sometimes a thought comes to us, an idea comes to us, and it just feels special, a special kind of answer, and it can be very relevant. So I think it's good to be very aware, because things go by in our minds that often we're not aware of them. Things are playing in our minds that might be answers for us, but if we're not open to them, we can't hear them or see them. So,
Right, exactly. That's why meditation is so important, because so many thoughts go through the mind, and the mind is chattering all the time. And when we can quiet the mind, we can start to hear, we can receive guidance from within ourselves. So learning how to quiet the mind, which is not such an easy task, to do because the mind is, trying so hard to protect ourselves, by trying to figure out life so much with our thoughts that we don't allow ourselves the opportunity. I call it holy silence. The holy silence that allows us to receive inspiration, guidance, just as this woman did. She said, sing. Sing. And a lot of people have received guidance that they heard and they were able to change the course of their life. So learning how to meditate, how to quiet, how to listen, how to talk to God, how to receive, all of those opportunities to go forward in life in a way that is divinely designed for each of our own benefit. Nobody can tell you what to do. Ultimately, it has to resonate within you. So we find that within ourselves by learning how to quiet the mind and listen.
Getting back to the lady who prayed for her son and was disappointed, I think I read that in your book you mentioned a rabbi who said that God is experiencing the suffering of humans. And it might just sound like a nice thing to say, but how I see it is that the universal consciousness had a desire to experience finite realities. And so we are actually what that divine consciousness would look like in a finite embodied reality. So what we are experiencing here and the suffering that we undergo is being experienced by the divine. So, and I don't think it's not imaginative, it's simply a reality of what the world could actually be. And it's a lot to take in when you really look at that.
Yeah, I think that teaching was relayed in one of the stories of a person who lost her son to terrorism. People wrestled with that. That wasn't coming from me, but was coming from her. And realizing, and I agree, and that's part of the Kabbalistic teaching, that God created this world because God wanted to experience love, compassion in a finite world. I said to somebody a teaching from my teacher, and I'm just remembering, I said it this past weekend on Shabbos. I said, this is from Reb Shlomo Kalba, why do people give flowers to loved ones? It was Mother's Day. And it would make more sense. Give a plant. Does a plant last? If you want to give a lasting testimony of life, you give a plant. A flower is not going to last a week. It's not going to last long. So the teaching is we give flowers precisely because they're not going to last long. We're saying to the person, we had precious moments together. They're beautiful moments, and I treasure them. And because they don't last forever, they're even more precious. So God created this world because living in a finite reality makes life very precious because it doesn't last forever. But we are blessed, according to Kabbalah teachings. We have the opportunity to live in a finite reality as human beings, but we also have the opportunity to live in a more expanded reality as souls. So we can be infinite and we can be finite at the same time. And there's a certain preciousness about being finite and treasuring the moments that we have when we are physically embodied, knowing that we're not going to be here forever. So these moments are very precious, and that we should honor and treasure them and make them meaningful and not waste them as we often do, killing time. I have to kill time because we don't know how to be with ourselves. And so learning how to be with ourselves, and for me, meditation and prayer are the ways that help me to feel fulfilled as a human being and to live my life with greater love and joy. There's a lot in the Kabbalistic teachings about understanding. And of course, the main one is that we are created in the image and likeness of God. So we need to meditate on that. What does that mean?
Yeah, there are so many things that are right there in plain sight to ponder and to contemplate, and it would give a great, deeper understanding if we did that. I want to ask you something that I really don't understand that well, and that is what you mentioned, the prophet Hosea, and he talks about God as a husband rather than as a master, and intimating that it's not a hierarchy, and this will be the relationship perhaps of man and God in the future. Could you elucidate on that a little bit?
Beautiful. Yeah, that's ultimately the goal of our relationship with God, is that God is not separate from us, above us, but that we experience this oneness with God, this love, this intimacy like lovers. And that's what the prophet is telling us. Don't make me a master above you, separate from you. Experience me as your lover. Experience me intimately. And ultimately, that's what we want our lives to have, at least moments of that, and more moments, more frequent moments of that, of feeling that level of intimacy with the Creator of all of life. That's very empowering. And I think one thing that I want to say, which I try to show in the book, is that even though people can have very negative experiences, and you would think that they could be disillusioned with God, like this woman, I don't believe in God because there's pain. Other people can have those experiences and say, my belief in God is stronger because I have pain, because I've called out to God. There was a story of a hostage who was in a cage and wasn't allowed to stand up or even move his arms. And he was in a cage for a month or two, and he started to connect with God in a way he never did, because he had no distractions. And he started to be filled with love and light. He felt a blessing of love and light that he never felt in his life. And what was interesting enough in this particular story with this hostage, somehow he was able to start to address his captors and said, let me help you. I'm a talented guy. I can cook for you. I can clean for you. I can do whatever you want. I can build tunnels for you. Anyway, they let him out of his cage in time. And he was able to help them. And he was also able, interestingly enough, to see television. So he had an idea of what was going on. You know, They didn't tell him that there were a few hundred people who were held in the tunnels. He knew of the few people, but he didn't know, and he learned. And anyway, he ended up being released, and in very good health, but transformed. He was not the same person who was living maybe a more frivolous life before. He was like 21, 22. Now he's a holy ambassador. And his last words were, "Believe in miracles. Life is precious." So he emerged. He's a powerful person, and his destiny was transformed, or maybe it was his destiny. It was his destiny that he underwent this experience and emerged to be such a powerful leader for people. So that's a big message of pain, to realize that it can help strengthen us. It can awaken our potential and empower us in ways that our soul really wants in this world. I feel that for myself. I experienced a lot of pain in my life. My first book, actually, I called out to write it from a hospital bed, where I felt in danger of dying. And I said to God, "Please let me live. Let me live. I want to live. And I'll write a book on Jewish meditation." I knew I had something important to say, but I lacked the confidence. So I had to be on death's door for me to experience and say, "Okay, God." And I survived, I lived, and lo and behold, I got out. Lo and behold, a literary agent, contacted me. And I hear you're teaching Jewish meditation. And she said, "I think that would be an interesting topic for a book." So she told me how to write a proposal. I wrote a proposal. And she said, "I don't like your writing style." I said, I never wrote before. Maybe you could give me some guidance." And she said, "I don't want to bother." Okay, I had the proposal. I mentioned this to a rabbi, and he directed me to the first vice president of William Morris, the top literary agent. I went in with my proposal. He saw it, and he said, "Okay." Within a month, I had a contract with royalties for my first book. And then I went on. But it was like I had to get to that point where I said, "Okay, God, please let me live. I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do what I wanted to do." But I lacked the confidence. So sometimes that happens. And all my books actually were written out of moments of holy tears, as I call it. So that's a blessing. It becomes a blessing.
Yeah, it reverberates throughout reality, and somehow the conduit is opened to bring the blessings in and manifest, which it clearly did for you. When things are difficult and people perhaps can be cruel, there is the concept of the negative inclination.
Right.
Where does that come from? Where does the Kabbalistic concept of the negative or evil inclination come?
Yeah, we have a good inclination and an evil inclination. So we have the capacity to make choices. If we were just good, then we wouldn't have any free will and we wouldn't be able to make choices. So the negative inclination, which we all have within us, so it's good that we identify it. It's part of the ego that says, "I'm in charge, I'm in control," and doesn't really believe in God in a meaningful way, and feels that, what happens in life is really a function of what they do. And so the ego wants to feel empowered and in charge. Sometimes the ego gets crushed and surrenders, and sometimes a person continues to suffer longer because they don't want to surrender. And the ego is usually just thinking about its own welfare, and the good inclination, which is coming from our soul, is peaceful and is thinking of, what can I do to serve the whole?
Could you tell us now about what the soul is in Kabbalistic terms?
Well, there's
Where it's
different
centered.
We have, as I talk about in my meditations and in the books, according to Kabbalistic teachings, we have levels of our soul. And there's 5 levels of the soul. Some are within the physical body that empower the physical body to, the eyes function according to the soul. The heart beats. There's a biological thing, but everything biological is rooted in something spiritual. So there's a level of that soul that is known as the nephesh, and it's in the physical body. There's a level of the soul that is called the ruach, which gives us the capacity to feel. The soul within us loves to feel. And so giving ourselves that ability to feel, to be loving, to be compassionate, is something that makes our soul happy. The mind, the soul, likes to think. And the neshama, the higher level of the soul, is on the top of the head. And that's where we receive our spiritual guidance. And the other levels of the soul are outside of the physical body. We are greater. Our soul is much greater than our physical body. And that's so important because we think naturally that we are limited to our physical body. But we're taught, no, we're not limited to our physical body. And that the higher levels of our soul are outside of our physical body. So we exist, the soul exists within our physical body, and it also surrounds our physical body. So we want to attend to our soul on all these levels. God willing, when we die, we will be able to relinquish our physical body, our sense of ego identity, and realize that I'm moving into a deeper, more expanded expression of who I am as a soul. So that's why great people are said to die with a kiss. Because they say, okay, I'm ready to experience myself in a more expanded way. I'm ready to experience my unity with God. And of course, we don't have to wait to death to have moments of feeling that unity with God, with all of creation. Because when we feel unity with God, we feel unity with all of creation. And our heart is very open to love. And I always say in my classes that we know we touch the level of the neshama when we start to feel peaceful. And what is happening outside of us isn't what's happening within us. That we can discern between what is happening within us to what is happening outside of us. So we work to experience ourselves on a soul level. And so understanding that there's levels to the souls, and in my other books I have teachings about how to access the different levels of the soul, and of course in my meditation classes, and everybody's invited to join. The meditation classes are all free. Everybody's welcome to come or to check out the YouTube channel where there are some meditations.
There are 2 soul levels that I had not heard of, and these are the levels outside the body. which what I know one is called
Haya and Yechida.
and Yechida. So do people actually reach these levels of the soul? Do they become one with them, or is this a striving to find
No,
this?
I believe people reach it. I believe it's possible to reach it in this lifetime. You may, and that's what we would call a holy person. A holy person is a person who's able to not only reach those higher levels of the soul, but is able to maintain that awareness, that embodiment, even while living in a limited physical body. To me, that's a holy person. And I believe our prophets reached it. And I believe there are people today who reached that level of holiness, of consistent connection to the higher levels of their soul. They're not afraid of death. And often they have a message to share with the world because they want to lift up the world. They didn't come here for material gain. They didn't come here to satisfy the desires of their ego. They came here to be a blessing and to lift up the lives of other people. So I believe that is true. People can reach that level, and there are people who have reached that level. And many of us will have moments where we do reach that level. And the more we meditate, the more we pray, the more good deeds we do, we can experience those moments more consistently. But not all of us are going to be in the consciousness. The challenge is, can I be in the consciousness of God even when my physical body is hurting? Or when I experience a loss? And we've seen there's a man who lost 3 children recently in a bombing in Israel. He didn't fall apart. He went on to continue to teach about holiness and God. He just lost 3 children. This is incredible. So there are people that are shining that level of light, even in the midst of such loss.
And towards the end of your book, you share a very personal and intense experience that you underwent. And I didn't know this about you. At 22 years of age, you were taken from a parking area and you were brutally, very brutally assaulted, raped, and you were stabbed and nearly killed and had to, bleeding, go find help, walking to a house that you found. It was a terrible trauma. And when I read it, I felt myself starting to have a weeping response to it. How did you come out of that? Did that terrible trauma become somehow a way for you to thrive?
That was the first time I shared that story. I share in a lot of my books, other personal, that I shared that story for the first time. And maybe there was one other person who I shared that story in detail with. Even my brother. There were details in that sharing that I never shared. And somehow I felt, as I was reading the stories of other people, let me share something that was very challenging for me. And I went through it. It changed the trajectory of my life. And I could write a book about how it changed my life. But I did share how I was planning to go to Israel. I didn't go to Israel. I ended up getting a job I ended up becoming a social worker. I ended up teaching Jewish meditation. Ended up living in an ashram. All of these things came out of that experience of that trauma. And it took a long time to heal from it. And it was a process. And for me, it was a spiritual awakening. I didn't find it really helpful for me because I couldn't really allow myself to feel the pain of it because it was too traumatic. I needed meditation to give me the strength to be able to relive it and to be able to begin to release it. And the whole story, I got my graduate education paid for. I wasn't planning to be a social worker. I was just I didn't think about it, but life changed me and from that experience. And, I wanted to share it and, give testimony that even these horrible situations can be a springboard to do something good.
For someone who's gone through something deeply traumatic, what would you want them to know about healing from it? That they can heal from it?
Exactly. That we always have the capacity to heal. And healing comes from that deepening connection with God, deepening connection to who we are as a spiritual being, not just a physical being. We hear so many stories of people who lose legs, who suffer, who have gone through even much worse than I did. And they go on to live and smile, and they thrive and they make a contribution. There's no trauma that needs to defeat us. When you can access the power of the Creator, and I say that in the book, God is the power that enables us to overcome challenge, affliction, addiction. Even the 12-step programs are all about that. Access higher power.
And you mentioned forgiveness and gratitude.
Yes, and gratitude is a big one. Gratitude is the biggest one. If we want to receive blessing in our life, we have to become grateful for what we have. And then God says, okay, you have a capacity to receive. You're grateful. Let me lay on some more reasons for you to be grateful, because you have a capacity to be grateful, to receive. Which also brings me, I want to just say a mention, because we're coming close to the new month of Sidran. The Hebrew calendar is divided into months, and every month has a unique energy associated with it. It's like astrology, but it's Kabbalah teachings on the month. I used to do a gathering I had a student who was an astrologer, so I would teach about the month, and from Kabbalistic perspective, she would teach from an astrological perspective, and we say, oh, we're talking the same language. So this month coming up is all about receiving. The art, I call it the art of infinite receiving. And so everything up to now has been a preparation. This is the month, it's the most beautiful month. And physically, generally it's the most beautiful month, but it's also the most beautiful month spiritually. And it's about having the vessels to receive the beauty of life, be able to see godliness in the world, in nature, in each other, in yourself. Today as I walk, every morning I try to do an early morning walk. And I'm amazed how the birds are chirping so loud and so beautifully. And the squirrels and the rabbits, they're all having fun before the people come out. And we say, yeah, God created them too. And so I wrote a book called Living in the Divine Flow, which is about the months, the energy of the months, because some months are months to travel. Some months are good months to make money. Some months are good months for love. Some months are good months to work on anger. So each month has its own energy. And so this book gives guidance on how to access that energy more completely. So I wanted to take this opportunity to share that with people.
Melinda, would you be willing to do another show on the months? Because I think people would be very interested to learn about that. Would love
Yes, I would love it. Menachem, it's a lovely opportunity. I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk with you and to have the opportunity to share with many people who will tune into this broadcast. It's meaningful. Thank you for fulfilling my sole purpose.
I'm really glad to share this with everybody. And on that note, I want to wish you and everyone a happy Sivan coming up, the month for receiving. And just
A
said,
lot of love and
okay,
one of intimacy.
yeah, I think everyone would agree with that we want to experience a lot of love. So until then, I'll say for now, all good things to you and to be continued.
And to you too,
Yeah.
Menachem.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Everybody's welcome to come to meditation classes, to sign up for my newsletter, my YouTube channel.
Definitely. Definitely. Very
Okay.
good.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.